let's talk about LSU this season and the schedule, the expectations, the replacements of what they got to do to have a great season. Because to me, it starts on both lines of scrimmage.
Yeah, and you got Blake Baker that came over from Missouri, sort of year two as a defensive coordinator. And can they take that leap and do those things that you're talking about? Because the big thing for them defensively is you lost Swinson and Jones. 103 quarterback pressures and 14 sacks that those two guys took to the NFL in the third and fifth round. And you bring in Pyburn from Florida, Peyton from Florida State. You bring in the Butler kid from Nebraska. By the way, those three players, basically half in terms of production a season ago. 57 pressures, 8 sacks. So, yeah, you got Whit Weeks. You got Harold Perkins coming back.
So you get Perkins Jr. back from the ACL, which is like obviously a plus to that, like, because there's no minus with losing or with that sucker. And then Whit Weeks, obviously, do you have the best 1-2 punch in the country at linebacker at rushing the passer and like making crap happen? Because with Weeks and Perkins Jr., I might say that
as a twosome, very much so. Especially if you get earlier, truly healthy version of Perkins, because it's almost seemingly, unfortunately for him, the play is kind of decreased as his role has changed over time. Other questions that you said the biggest question there, but can you win an opener? Because it's as big as it gets.
Ain't done it since Joe Burrow was there. They
Lost
haven't
5
won
straight.
an opener since Joe Burrow was at LSU.
That's a while ago, which, by the way, you think about what we're doing here. We're starting to preview the SEC because the SEC media days are coming up next week. All sort of talky season. So the teams that we're going to go talk about today are those that are being the coaches that are there at SEC Media Days on Monday. And you mentioned Joe Burrow, because outside of the 2019 year with LSU, it's been a Georgia or Bama domination of this league in terms of winning the conference. And you're looking for some of these other teams like LSU with your quarterback back, with Nussmeier back, to take a step and potentially be someone who knocks one of those teams off the pedestal. So, Nussmeier.
To me, you got Nussmeier, like you just mentioned. And so to start this off, that's great. 4 guys of the 5 up front are gone, and they got drafted. They went to the NFL. And here's the disturbing part. Like when I start to look at this roster, Brent, I see a lot of great. I see a lot of great. I see a lot of good things. I see a lot to be excited about. I see a team, if everything went perfect, they could go to the playoffs. If the season meshed together, if the new additions are who the new additions are, like they're a team that could somehow get it together. But the offensive line a year ago, Brent, had 4 guys drafted in a top 5 pick, and they didn't have balance on offense. And that's where, like, that has to grow for me. Like, I saw Caden Durham, who's an animal. Like, this dude is a freshman. He proved he's one of the best backs in the country. He had more receiving yards than any other freshman in the country. He was good at that. He was almost 3.5 yards after contact every single time he touched the football. Like, this dude can play the game. They've got to have more balance. If Nussmeier has balance on this offense, good luck. Like, they're going to score points at will against everybody. And then the defense obviously comes along and makes plays. But if you're starting to look at, how you're going to pick them to finish, Brent, what are you looking at with this squad to say they could go to the playoffs, they could not? What are those biggest factors?
I see. Well, so in terms of factors and/or questions, one, you mentioned the defense. That was one. Can they win an opener? And then the running game, because they were last in the SEC last year in rushing. But the schedule is just like, that's what's when you look at the SEC and projecting any of these teams, there's so much. I can be beaten by almost anyone on my schedule. And by the way, that now includes Vandy. So, there's so much of looking at their schedule. Like they get Florida at home early. That to me is the opener is, yes, it's a big game.
You think the best game in the country. Yeah.
It's a really big one. But in terms of the SEC and where they want to be, to ultimately get to, it's an SEC driven season for them, and that first game or that night game at home against Florida early to me is borderline game of the season for them to get them rolling moving forward. But also, you mentioned the additions and the great. I'm curious if the law firm of Anderson, and Brown at receiver, with a couple transfers there, and Barion Brown to me is one that I really want to see what he looks like playing with somebody like Garrett Nussmeier. Because from a talent perspective, I think his talent is borderline second to none in the up there with some of the upper echelon receivers in the SEC. But he's played with inconsistent quarterbacks. Can he
That's a
be
nice way to
big
say
time?
It's a very nice way to say it. Inconsistent quarterbacks. He's played
Inconsistent.
and that's the thing about receivers. They're dependent on other people to get them the football. So a lot of times you don't see how great they are. But you mentioned Anderson too, and I really liked him in the slot. Like really good slot receiver that can make things happen. Good after the catch. So I think they've got a variation of receivers. They got the running back. The offensive line, does that come to fruition? The schedule you mentioned though, at Clemson, at Ole Miss, at Bama, at OU. That's a lot of ats. And I think early in the season, while this all things coming together, like, are they out of it before they blinked? Like, are they out of it before they gel? Because I see this team down the stretch being a team that, like, crap, you don't want to fool with. You don't want to mess with. Once they've gelled, once they've got experience. But coming out of the gates, how good is LSU? And to me, that's why they're not going to make the playoff. To me, they're a 9-3 team, which is, I think, a good season. Last year they were 9-4. First time I think Brian Kelly hadn't won. Hadn't been ranked at the end of the season. That's not normal for LSU. But I think it's going to be in that vein again because I think the inconsistencies along the offensive line as the season starts out. So I got them at 9-3. What you got them at?
That right around there. That's what. If I'm looking at this especially from a playoff projection standpoint, I think the SEC is going to be in trouble again in terms of getting that fourth team because you're going to have a ton of 9-3s and teams that, and I think almost their hope is that some of the things we talked about with the Big Ten and the bottom of the Big Ten coming up and creating a little bit more parity in the Big Ten to where you don't have that 11-1 Indiana that gets the fourth spot. If you get more of that and you have a 10-2 Big Ten, 9-3 SEC team with a big win, I think LSU is going to be one of these. I think basically the 4 teams we're talking about today could be all in that literal same boat, 8-4, 9-3 kind of thing. So, and Trades, one other name, Trades Green. Your earlier tweet in the week about the tight end in football, college football. So many responses for that kid, the kid that plays hoops, 6'7" kid, very good athlete.